I was probably mentally weak. I was losing focus a lot. If they gave me 10 things I needed to do, I could remember 5. If they gave me 5 to do, I could remember 3.
3 different women just came forward with identical stories about their husband's mental capacity, but this time they didn't have to say a word. Kody Brown just confirmed everything they've been trying to tell us for years, and he did it with the kind of devastating honesty that makes you wonder if he realizes what he just admitted. "I was probably mentally weak," Kody stated in a recent press interview, delivering this bombshell with all the casual confidence of someone ordering coffee. "I was losing focus a lot. They would tell me to do something and I would try to execute it, but I couldn't follow. If they gave me 10 things I needed to do, I could remember 5. If they gave me 5 to do, I could remember 3. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the same man who spent years positioning himself as the capable decision-maker for 4 separate households, the spiritual head who claimed divine authority over family finances, living arrangements, and major life decisions, the husband who consistently portrayed his wives as emotional or irrational when they questioned his judgment. And now he's telling us that under pressure, his cognitive function collapses like a house of cards. The context makes this confession even more devastating. Kody made these admissions while promoting his appearance on Special Forces, a reality show designed to strip away all pretense and reveal who people really are when pushed to their limits. For years, his wives endured high-pressure situations, pregnancy complications, financial crises, custody battles, family emergencies, and apparently they were dealing with someone whose mental processing becomes unreliable the moment things get intense.
I was surprised how much brain fog I would get into the situation. I didn't find it physically. I found my breaking point was like more mentally.
"I surprised how much brain fog I would get into this situation," he continued. And that phrase brain fog is doing some serious heavy lifting here. This isn't about forgetting appointments or misplacing car keys. This is about fundamental cognitive dysfunction under stress, the kind that makes you question every major family decision this man has ever made. But here's what makes this revelation particularly infuriating for anyone who's been following the Brown family saga. Christine, Janelle, and Mary have been trying to communicate serious concerns for years, often being dismissed as dramatic or failing to see the bigger picture. Now we discover that the person they were trying to reason with literally cannot process complex information when under pressure. The timing couldn't be more perfect or more damning. Christine's memoir has been exposing years of dysfunction, and now Kody himself is providing the missing piece of the puzzle. It's like watching someone accidentally confess to the very behavior patterns their victims have been describing, except he seems to think he's just sharing an interesting personality quirk. What makes this admission even more remarkable is the complete lack of self-awareness in his delivery. He's discussing serious cognitive impairment as if it's no big deal, apparently not connecting the dots between his mental fragility under pressure and the years of family chaos that somehow always seem to center around his decision-making. This isn't just about reality TV performance anxiety. This is about a man who claimed authority over multiple families while apparently operating with the mental reliability of a broken GPS system. Every high-stakes family meeting, every financial crisis, every moment when his wives needed him to process complex emotional information, he's just told us his brain essentially stops working properly. And that's when it got even messier, because Kody's mental meltdown on Special Forces wasn't some sudden shock to his system. The warning signs were flashing bright red months before he ever stepped foot on that set, and he ignored every single one of them. Picture this scene, because it's almost too perfect to be real. Kody gets the call about Special Forces and immediately starts what he calls trying to improve my workout for 5 years, maybe 4, 3 years. Already we're getting classic Kody math, where specific timelines become as reliable as his memory under pressure. He's been half-heartedly attempting fitness for an undefined period, getting in a good hour-and-a-half workout before checking his phone and declaring himself good enough. Then reality comes knocking in the form of a preparation list, and suddenly Kody discovers he's been living in a fantasy.
I live at 7,000 feet. I start swimming, and I realize that I'm in terrible shape. So I put on a 50-pound Birkin rucksack and started hiking. I was physically prepared, but I didn't think I was.
I live at 7,000 feet. I start swimming, and I realize that I'm in terrible shape. Swimming is a whole another type of workout. I was like, if they're going to make me swim much, I'm going to die out there. Let's pause here and appreciate the layers of delusion being peeled back. This man spent years presenting himself as capable of handling anything life threw at him, yet he didn't realize until 5 weeks before filming that his fitness level was completely inadequate for the challenge he'd agreed to take on. It's like agreeing to perform surgery and then discovering you're squeamish around blood. But here's where the story gets really telling about Kody's relationship with reality. Instead of acknowledging that maybe he wasn't prepared for this level of challenge, he doubles down with what he calls preparation. So I put on a 50-pound rucksack and started hiking. Swam a little bit. I was physically prepared, but I didn't think I was. Notice that contradiction? He was physically prepared, but he didn't think he was. This is classic Kody logic, where facts become negotiable depending on what narrative he needs to maintain. The man who just admitted he was in terrible shape 5 weeks earlier is now claiming he was actually physically prepared. He just had confidence issues. The timeline of this disaster tells us everything we need to know about how Kody operates under pressure. He had 9 weeks to prepare, more time than anyone else on the cast, according to him. But instead of using that advantage wisely, he peaked halfway through his preparation and then watched his progress stagnate. At about 5 weeks, something went wrong and I wasn't improving anymore. I was like, what am I going to do? This isn't just about fitness. This is about a pattern of behavior that anyone who's dealt with unreliable people will recognize instantly. Big talk up front, initial burst of effort, then confusion and panic when sustained commitment is required. It's the same energy as promising to handle all the household finances and then acting confused when the bills pile up. What makes this whole preparation saga even more revealing is how Kody frames his own experience. He had more preparation time than other cast members, yet he's positioning himself as disadvantaged. He discovered fundamental gaps in his abilities with plenty of time to address them, yet he's surprised when those gaps become problems on the show. The swimming revelation is particularly brutal because it exposes something deeper than just physical fitness. Swimming requires sustained focus, controlled breathing, and the ability to manage panic when you're struggling. All the exact skills that Kody would need to handle high-pressure family situations, financial crises, or complex relationship dynamics. Skills he apparently never developed, despite years of claiming he could handle multiple wives and their various needs simultaneously. But the real red flag in this whole preparation disaster isn't the physical struggle. The real red flag comes from how quickly his fellow cast members figured out exactly who they were dealing with. Because while Kody was busy convincing himself he was physically ready but mentally unprepared, the other contestants were getting a front row seat to something far more revealing. Watching someone who thinks leadership means talking loudly while contributing very little. A lot of your fellow Special Forces cast have already said they didn't exactly jive with you in this experiment. What was going on? The interviewer's question lands like a perfectly aimed arrow, and Kody's response tells us everything we need to know about why 3 wives eventually said enough and walked away.
Gen X, man. I mean, and I have a big mouth. and I was like, I think of it as being very generous. Other people think about it being bossy.
I'm Gen X, man. It's just a different culture, and most of them were younger than my children, you know? Or like I was old enough to be their parent. Right out of the gate, Kody reaches for the age card, as if being older automatically explains why people found him insufferable. This is the same deflection tactic we've seen him use with his wives dismiss their concerns by suggesting they just don't understand his superior perspective. But then comes the part that should have every woman who's ever dealt with a mansplainer taking notes. I have a big mouth, and I think of it as being very generous. Other people think about it being bossy, you know? So it's like, hey, listen, can you pick that up and help me? You know, and it's like a little demanding. It came across wrong. Let's decode this masterpiece of self-delusion. Kody genuinely believes that being demanding and having a big mouth equals generosity. In his mind, telling people what to do is him doing them a favor. This isn't just tone deafness, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how human relationships work. He thinks leadership means issuing orders and then acting confused when people don't appreciate his help. The example he gives is particularly telling. Hey, listen, can you pick that up and help me? Notice the structure of that request. It's not, could you help me with this? Or would you mind grabbing that? It's a command disguised as a question, with the underlying assumption that his needs take priority and other people exist to fulfill them. What makes this revelation even more damaging is how it perfectly explains years of family dynamics. Think about every Sister Wives episode where Kody seemed genuinely baffled by his wife's frustration. Every time he acted like he was being reasonable while they were being emotional or difficult. We now have his own admission that he regularly issues demands while genuinely believing he's being generous and helpful. The contrast with his castmate Johnny Manziel is particularly striking. When asked about the same dynamic, Johnny takes a completely different approach. I had a great experience. I needed him in multiple ways throughout the show. I enjoyed being around him. I think being in a locker room from football, you understand how important morale is, how important it is to make friends quickly and understand people's different lives and different perspectives. Johnny, talking about someone he barely knew, shows more emotional intelligence and empathy in one paragraph than Kody displays in the entire interview. He acknowledges different backgrounds, respects varying perspectives, and focuses on building relationships rather than managing people. The difference is stark and revealing. But here's what makes Kody's cast rejection even more significant than just reality TV drama. This wasn't a group of people who knew his history or had preconceived notions about him. These were strangers meeting him fresh, with no context about his family situation or past behavior patterns, and within days, maybe hours, they'd figured out that something was off about how he interacted with people. That kind of immediate social rejection doesn't happen to people who are genuinely generous or naturally collaborative. It happens to people who consistently center their own needs while convincing themselves they're being helpful. It happens to people who issue commands and then act confused when others don't appreciate their leadership style. The fact that multiple cast members independently came to similar conclusions about Kody tells us this wasn't about personality clashes or cultural differences. This was about behavior patterns that made people uncomfortable quickly and consistently. But the most revealing part of this cast dynamic isn't what Kody did wrong. It's his complete inability to understand why people reacted negatively to his behavior. Because when someone can't distinguish between being helpful and being controlling, you're looking at a fundamental disconnect from reality that explains decades of family dysfunction. I think of it as being very generous. Other people think about it being bossy. Kody explained with the kind of genuine confusion that makes you want to shake him. This isn't just poor self-awareness. This is a man who has spent years rewriting his own behavior in his head until demanding compliance looks like kindness. Think about the mental gymnastics required to reach that conclusion. In Kody's world, telling people what to do equals helping them. Issuing commands becomes acts of service. Taking charge transforms into generosity. It's the same twisted logic that convinced him managing 4 wives' lives was actually him being a devoted husband rather than a controlling partner. The really disturbing part is how confidently he delivers this assessment. There's no moment of reflection, no consideration that maybe multiple people reaching the same negative conclusion about his behavior might indicate a pattern worth examining. Instead, he doubles down on his interpretation while dismissing everyone else's experience as misunderstanding his good intentions. This delusion becomes even more significant when you realize these cast members had no investment in mischaracterizing him. They weren't his wives trying to escape his control, or his children dealing with years of inconsistent parenting. They were strangers with no reason to paint him negatively, yet they independently came to similar conclusions about his behavior. But what's even more telling is how this revelation connects to something much bigger than reality TV drama. This is the same mindset that convinced Kody his financial decisions were protecting his family when they were actually creating chaos. The same perspective that turned neglecting 3 wives into evidence of his devotion to Robyn. When someone consistently interprets their controlling behavior as generosity, you're not dealing with simple miscommunication. You're dealing with cognitive dysfunction that goes far deeper than anyone realized, and Kody's own admissions about his memory failures reveal just how severe the problem really is. If they gave me 10 things I needed to do, I could remember 5. If they gave me 5 to do, I could remember 3. Let that mathematical disaster sink in for a moment. This isn't about being overwhelmed by complex instructions. This is about a 50% failure rate on basic information retention, and it gets worse as the pressure increases. But here's what makes this admission absolutely chilling for anyone who's followed the Brown family saga. Think about every major family decision, every financial crisis, every moment when his wives needed him to process and remember important information about their children's needs, their household expenses, their relationship concerns. We're now learning that under stress, Kody literally cannot hold on to half of what he's told. The timeline makes this even more disturbing. These memory failures weren't happening during months of grueling competition. They were happening within minutes or hours of receiving instructions. They would tell me to do something, and I would try to execute it, he explained, as if the gap between receiving information and completely losing track of it was somehow normal. This explains so many previously baffling moments. Every time Kody seemed to forget conversations his wives swore they'd had with him. Every instance where he appeared genuinely confused about commitments he'd made or problems he'd agreed to solve, every moment when his wives looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language while he insisted they were being unreasonable. What's particularly infuriating is how this connects to years of gaslighting. His wives weren't imagining that he forgot important information or failed to follow through on crucial commitments. But the real revelation comes from what this tells us about Robyn's position in Kody's hierarchy, because nothing exposes someone's true feelings like watching them try to be charming in an interview while accidentally revealing their deepest prejudices. Do you think she would go off and do this? The interviewer asks about Robyn potentially appearing on Special Forces. Kody's response lands like a verbal slap.
Robyn, I've seen her in childbirth, so I know how tough she is. She's a very, very tender soul, and this is a very mean environment. not against your peers, but it's an environment designed to break you, so it is cruel to you and your peers. I would never want her to be in that environment.
I wouldn't ever let Robyn do this. I would never put her through this. And I don't think she's a tender person. She's a great mother, but she's not going to be focused on her fitness. As if Robyn needs his permission to pursue opportunities or make decisions about her own career. This is the same controlling energy that made his other wives feel suffocated, except now he's broadcasting it to a national audience while thinking he sounds protective. The fitness comment is particularly brutal because it reveals how Kody actually sees the woman he supposedly chose over everyone else. While defending his own physical capabilities, he casually throws Robyn under the bus by suggesting she lacks focus on fitness. This from the man who just admitted he discovered he was in terrible shape 5 weeks before filming and had to scramble to prepare. Compare this to how Johnny Manziel talked about his ex Brie from Selling Sunset. She's a big enough badass that she would be able to do it. She could do it from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint. Even discussing someone he's no longer with, Johnny shows respect and acknowledges her strengths. But Kody, describing his current wife, she's tender, unfocused, and needs his protection from opportunities that might actually pay well. The condescension is breathtaking. And then comes the comment that should have every woman taking notes about how quickly men reveal their true feelings about female strength. I don't think she's a tender person. She's a great mother, but she's not going to be focused on fitness and trying to do crazy things. Wait, let's pause here because something doesn't add up. Robyn is simultaneously too tender for special forces, but also not a tender person? Kody's logic is unraveling in real time, and it's revealing how he actually views the woman he supposedly prioritized over 3 other wives. But the real kicker comes when you remember that this tender woman has given birth 5 times without medication and, according to Kody's own previous statements, without a whimper. The same woman who quietly endured years of sister-wife drama, public scrutiny, and financial instability while raising young children. Yet somehow she's too delicate for a reality show that Kody himself admits mentally broke him. The contrast becomes even more stark when you consider what we know about Robyn's actual resilience. She's the one who stayed when everyone else left. She's managing a household with Kody's documented cognitive issues under pressure. She's dealing with the fallout from Christine's tell-all memoir while maintaining some semblance of family stability. But in Kody's mind, pursuing a lucrative television opportunity would be too much for her tender constitution, the same opportunity that he pursued while admitting he wasn't mentally fit for the challenge. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. What makes this whole exchange even more revealing is how it connects to Kody's broader pattern of underestimating women while overestimating himself. He genuinely thought he could handle special forces despite being unprepared, but Robyn couldn't possibly manage it despite having demonstrated years of actual resilience. This isn't protection, it's projection. And nowhere is that more obvious than in how Kody describes his relationships with his fellow cast members. Because while he's busy explaining why everyone misunderstood his generous leadership style, he accidentally reveals something far more damaging about his ability to form genuine connections. I think it's a friendship that everybody develops out of hardship, Kody says about bonding with Johnny Manziel, and Johnny immediately corrects him with surgical precision. Trauma bonding. 2 words that perfectly capture what actually happened on that set, and Kody completely misses the significance. Trauma bonding isn't the same as friendship formed through shared challenges. It's what happens when people survive difficult experiences together and form connections based on that survival. Johnny understands this distinction. Kody thinks they're just buddies who went through something tough together. The contrast in how they describe their relationship is telling. Johnny talks about needing Kody in multiple ways throughout the show and emphasizes understanding different perspectives and backgrounds. He shows genuine appreciation for what Kody brought to the experience, even while acknowledging that others found him difficult. But when Kody describes the same relationship, it's all about what he gave rather than what he received. I think I'm friendly, he says, as if being friendly is the same as being supportive or collaborative. He's focused on his own intentions rather than the actual impact of his behavior. What's particularly revealing is that Kody managed to form exactly 1 meaningful connection out of an entire cast, and even that relationship required someone with Johnny's specific background and team dynamics to make it work. Being in a locker room from football, you understand how important morale is, Johnny explains, essentially describing the emotional labor he had to do to maintain a working relationship with someone most people found insufferable. The isolation wasn't accidental, and the behind-the-scenes revelations from production make it clear that Kody's struggles went far beyond normal reality TV drama. Because when the people running the show start admitting they pushed things too far, you know something genuinely concerning happened on that set. We went to dinner last night and they were like, listen, some of those things that we put you through were sketchy, even by our standards, were really dangerous by our standards. Kody recounts with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. But buried in that statement is a bombshell that should have everyone paying attention. The directing staff essentially admitted they crossed lines with this particular cast, and Kody's response reveals just how disconnected from reality he'd become. Instead of recognizing the severity of what he'd been put through, he frames it as evidence of how tough and willing he was to follow orders. "Scary how willing I was to do whatever the DS asked me to do," he says, as if blind compliance under dangerous conditions is something to be proud of. This isn't about being a good sport or showing determination. This is about someone whose judgment became so compromised under pressure that production staff had concerns about safety protocols. When reality TV producers who specialize in pushing people to their limits start questioning whether they went too far, that's not a badge of honor, that's a red flag about mental state and decision-making capacity. The timing of these admissions makes them even more significant. Kody is revealing all of this while promoting the show, apparently not realizing that he's essentially confirming he became a liability on set. He's proud of his willingness to do dangerous things when his judgment was compromised, which tells us everything about how he's processed this experience. But what makes this revelation truly chilling is how it connects to years of family decision-making, because everything Kody just admitted about his performance on Special Forces perfectly explains the chaos that destroyed his family. And for the first time, we're getting confirmation straight from his own mouth about cognitive patterns his wives have been dealing with for decades. Think about the mathematical precision of this disaster. A man who admits his memory fails 50% of the time under pressure spent years making financial decisions that affected multiple households. Someone who describes himself as mentally weak when challenged positioned himself as the spiritual and practical leader of 4 separate families. A person who becomes cognitively unreliable under stress was supposedly managing custody schedules, medical decisions, and household budgets for over a dozen people. The phoenix metaphor Kody keeps referencing, burning down his old self, becomes darkly ironic when you realize he's accidentally providing evidence that his old self was exactly as unreliable as his wives claimed. He wanted to rise from the ashes, but instead he's confirming that the ashes were justified. What's particularly devastating is how this connects to Robyn's current situation. She's now alone with someone who admits to cognitive dysfunction under pressure, yet he's positioned himself as her protector and decision-maker. The woman he won't let pursue opportunities is tied to someone who can't remember basic instructions when things get stressful. For Christine, Janelle, and Mary, these admissions must feel like validation and vindication rolled into one brutal package. Every time they tried to explain that Kody seemed absent or unreliable during crucial moments, they were dismissed as emotional or failing to understand his perspective. Now we know their perspective was accurate. He literally wasn't mentally present when they needed him most. The real revelation isn't that Kody struggles under pressure, it's that he built an entire family structure that required him to be reliable under pressure, then acted confused when it all fell apart. A fresh video is already queued up, and something tells me the next round of Kody's public confessions will be even more revealing than this psychological inventory.